Happy to welcome you all to the theater this afternoon for the first session of poetry readings at the Unsettling America Conference. My name is Sander Zuloff, and I am pleased to be with you. And I am also given the dubious role of being timekeeper this afternoon. And there's supposed to be a sign that says 2 minutes. That means that, you know, when I hold up the sign, but I've spent the last 15 minutes looking for the sign that says 2 minutes and can't find it. So I have this flag that says somebody. And when you see this flag, it means, you know, you've got 2 minutes, okay? Very good. The first poet this afternoon is Alfred Encarnacion. Is Alfred here? Alfred is not here. Then we will go on to the next poet. And when Alfred comes, if he would just identify himself for me, I'd be happy to introduce him. So our second poet this afternoon, is Vittoria Repeto, and she'll be introduced by Rachel Guido de Vries.
Hi. Vittoria's standing right here, ready to begin. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Vittoria Repeto is an Italian-American lesbian poet who lives, works, and plays in downtown Manhattan, where she was born in 1951. She's organized readings at the Wow Cafe and Mosaic Books. Her work has appeared in Earth's Daughters, Amethyst, and Mudfish. She has forthcoming work in Footwork, the Patterson Literary Review, and she's published a chapbook entitled Head for the Van Wyck. Please welcome Vittoria Repeto.
Hi. I'm going to read, I've got one poem in the anthology, and then I'm going to read some books from poems from my chapbook. The first one is Untitled. 6th grade, Our Lady of Pompeii. The nun said, "You're living in America now. Write your name with a C, the American way." When I argued, had to write it 100 times with a C. My Americanized classmates snickered. After school, seeing my face, hearing my story, Mama told the nun off. Mio nome è Vittoria, 2 T's, no C. Pasta poem. L'americana is talking, complaining. Yuppies say pasta instead of spaghetti. When she was a kid, it was just plain spaghetti. She looks at me, hoping to prove her point. I smile, say, when I was a kid, I ate linguine, ravioli, lasagna, capelletti, capelli di angeli, ziti, fettuccine, tortellini, and gnocchi. All pastas. When I was a kid, spaghetti was what Americans ate. Overcooked and out of a Chef Boyardee can. L'Americana shuts up. This is Untitled. During the door at a dyke bar, a customer asked, "Is this a mafia-owned bar?" Knowing the author, I say, "No, this is the Israeli connection." I smile like a Cheshire cat, noting her Star of David. Our story number 1. She put me on the scale, saying, "Doctor, she must be sick, anemic. Look at her. She's so white." My godmother, my comadre, was so dark she wouldn't have passed the paper bag test. Okay, the last poem I'm going to read is from a series of cab poems. And it contains some Italian words, and I'm going to translate them ahead of time. The words mean, up yours, shithead. I have to have my glasses on for this. Sunny mid-afternoon, Columbus Avenue. Seeing my name, the passenger starts in. Italians here don't know their language, only dialects. But he's an expert, studied in college, knows I's pronounced like double E's, and etc. Speaks a few phrases, butchering them like an English parrot. Finally, he gets out. I lean out the window, take off my shades, say clearly, no dialect. Va fanculo testa di merda. The passenger smiles and waves goodbye. Thank you.
Alfred Encarnacion is a mestizo of Filipino, German, and English descent. His chapbook is entitled At Winter's End. His poems have appeared in The Open Boat, Poems from Asian America, Indiana Review, and Oklahoma Review. Would you welcome, please, Alfred Encarnacion.
Hello. Sorry I was late. Okay. I usually get lost in these big auditoriums, but I'll try to be focused here. The poems I'll read all will focus on a historical figure named Carlos Bulasan. The first two poems are monologues. The first one is Bulasan listens to a recording of Robert Johnson. You sing a hard blues, black man. You too have been driven. A tumbleweed and strong wind. I close my eyes, your voice rolls out of the delta, sliding over flashy chords that clang like railroad tracks. Gotta keep moving, gotta keep moving. Blues falling down like hail. One summer I worked the washlie section of a cannery up north, scrubbed schools of headless fish, breathed ammonia fumes so fierce I almost floated off like the arm of a friend, chopped clean at the elbow by a cutter's machine. Gotta keep moving, hellhound on my trail. We are the blue men, Kabayan, our pockets empty of promise. Mississippi, California, bad luck conspires against us. Cheap wine stings in our veins. We reel drunk and bitter under a white legal sun. Robert Johnson, Carlos Bulasan, our names so different, our song the same. Bulasan was shanghaied the first week he arrived in America as a naive 19-year-old and was sent to the cannery, salmon canneries up in Alaska. He worked there all of his first summer, returned to Seattle, and saw how the Pinoys, he and the other Pinoys were exploited by the gambling establishments that the city allowed to function there. So this next poem deals with that. It's Bulasan, Seattle, Autumn 1933. Once more the leaves fall, flecked with messages from the dead. Their spiraling descent signaturing winter. The immigrants tremble, terrified like all vagrants of the cold, the cruel language of snow, of wind policing the city. These days I note a firm hesitation before I can write, as before I awake I seem to hold on to the last thread of sleep as it's pulled into light through the blue eye of morning. Now it's late afternoon. Soon the moon will rise from the sea's gnarled mist, a yellow beacon. I try to hide my shame in measures of song as I witness the plight of lives squandered in dance halls and gambling houses, vats of bootleg whiskey fermenting, dens filled with secret opium dreams, and Chinatown roses, their cash-only smiles, shimmer at windows grimy with sin. But I'm torn by men who wander these streets like tattered ghosts, women huddled in shadows stirring pots of thin soup, and that child who knelt one night in a lot strangely lit by a bonfire, who feasted on nothing but dark scraggly leaves and smiled as she hymned to Our Lady of Flames. How weather this grief that numbs into silence? How may my pen invoke beauty, not anger? Nothing inside me feels tempted to sing unless grievance is song, the fierce scrape of dead leaf against leaf, music. 2 minutes left. The third bullet's on poems. I'll end with a real short one I have here. This is called Way Down on Avenue K. In Fat Eddie's new K&A diner, the all-night crowd at the counter sits stiff as corpses or sheets of metal in the grip of vices, caught between rock and a hard place. Motley crew, drunken Poles from the textile factory, a few Puerto Rican pimps, some Italian bookies praising the old world but stuck here in the new. Black folks fill the booths. Betty's brother, Lil T, is out front arguing with some dude who needs some coins for the payphone on the corner. Sometimes people die because somebody ain't got the change. Juanita's all fucked up again on drugs. She keeps walking by the diner, looking through the window for Jake, the short-order cook who used to be her boyfriend. He's nowhere to be seen. He and Tommy Lee, the gay Chinese cashier, are down in the storeroom fooling around. Meanwhile, Betty's mad as hell back in the kitchen. Some motherfucker's been ripping tips off the table while she's been busy cooking, serving, and ringing up the checks. About time, she snaps when the guys return. Where'd you take your asses, China? Two rappers, Bigfoot and Soul Man, rehearse beneath the L's steel canopy. They dream of hitting the big time before some fool decides to smoke them in the hood. A white bluesman who used to bullshit everyone he was the illegitimate grandchild of blind Lemon Jefferson sits outside on a milk crate moaning at 2 a.m. I'm a motherless child. I'm a long ways from my home. On Avenue K, everyone's pain has its legitimacy. Thank you.
We have a slight leak up here, so if you come up and to read, watch that you don't slip, okay? It's a dangerous situation. I should have a sign that says wet floor. Madeline Tiger.
We'll introduce Enid Dame. I would love to make this personal and long because Enid Dame has for years been my inspiration. She's our great poet of Jewish mythology, Jewish folklore, and some material that could be seen as history, but coming from way back in pre-biblical times all the way up into the Brooklyn of our present and the conditions of our current lives in America. She's written a number of books and chapbooks. Her work on Lilith was seminal and an inspiration to many people, combining a sense of Lilith as a person and a wit about our view of Lilith from our time. Her most recent book is Anything You Don't See, which combines more persona poems with family poems and contemporary commentary kinds of poems. I understand that she's working on a novel now about 2 generations in a Jewish family, in a radical Jewish family. In introducing her, I would like to say that she has influenced many Jewish writers, but her Jewishness is not parochial, not only limited to people who share her history, but opens up into being broadly and deeply feminist and ultimately very human. Enid Dame.
Oh, thank you, Madeline. I hope I can live up to that beautiful introduction. This is On the Road to Damascus, Maryland. And there really is a Damascus, Maryland. It exists. On the road to Damascus, Maryland, between the trailer camps and rose bushes, I had a vision in the back seat of my parents' car. Once again, it was happening. I felt myself turning into someone else. I wasn't sure who yet. My parents were worried. Next week, I'd be 35. That was a long time ago. And I still didn't seem to know who I was. At other times, I'd already been a New York Jew, a radical teacher, an ethical culturist, a barefoot bread baker, a nice girl in knee socks. I was relieved when they changed the subject to where we'd eat lunch in Damascus. I sat in the back seat dreamily making a list of new names. This is the Seder. Thank you. This is the Seder. As many of you know, Jewish people celebrate their exodus from Egypt and slavery every spring in a ritual whose name, Seder, means order, and things have to be followed in a certain order. This is a very unusual Seder that I attended, however. This is the Seder. This is a strange Seder. Some of us are Irish, Italian, French, Canadian. One is Chinese from the mainland. Most of us are Jews. There are at least 3 types of socialists here. We have to keep the Bundists separate from the communists, who still maintain that Uncle Joe had a bad press. The anarchist glowers. He won't drink to the health of Israel or any other state. We sing Dayenu, Go Down Moses, and Solidarity Forever. The host person has designed a non-sexist Haggadah, stressing the universals. She's forgotten the hard-boiled eggs. But it doesn't matter. We've got horseradish, apples, and honey, warm, sticky wine. We fill up the glasses 4 times, set aside a cup for Elijah. The ritual flows around us. We start to connect. But I think of my secular relatives. They'd shake their heads, call us nostalgic, warming our hands above an unnecessary fire. My Orthodox relatives would be disgusted at our heresies, our bad pronunciations. They'd get up and leave. It's time for Elijah. Apprehensive, I open the door. He's come so far, been to so many holy, official places. What will he think of our oddly assorted communion? He wanders in smiling, empties his wine cup, calls me aside. Don't worry, my daughter, don't worry. You see, we keep on, we keep going on. One more recent. My father's favorite writer was a man whose pen name was Michael Gold, a Jewish writer who wrote a classic called Jews Without Money. He's not read much today for many reasons, part of which was his radical politics. But Jews Without Money, I really feel, is a classic immigrant text. He once talked, in another piece of writing, he talked about a play he once attended as a little boy with his mother on the Lower East Side. It was a Yiddish play called The Merchant of Venice. And it was about a Jewish man named Shylock, and he was a hero. The villain was the bad assimilationist daughter, Jessica, and Portia was not around. She wasn't very important. And there was a moment when everybody in the theater cried, kind of a communal crying, for Shylock's bad treatment. And then his mother gave him a salami sandwich to comfort him. I thought that was so wonderful, because it really says something about what goes in the canon and what is a canonical text. Here's Shakespeare, here's The Merchant of Venice, but not quite the play Shakespeare wrote. I wrote a poem about it, and it's about more than that. I guess it's about being a first or second generation Jewish person. Mike Gold and the Classics, 1. In this version, Jessica is the villain. This is a tale of a Jewish father betrayed. This play's a classic. We tore it up like a coat, restitched it, making it over to fit our story. We come from a long line of tailors. We understand alterations. 2, all the seats were filled that night at the Yiddish theater. Shakespeare often sold out on the Lower East Side. The air was heavy with clouds of smoky emotion. On stage, a Jewish father was the hero, a battered, self-pitying hero, a hero who loses. An old woman in the first row sighed, "It's just like life." My father's favorite author sat as a boy and wept in the dark at the bad daughter's treachery. Beguiled by the Gentile world, she ran down the fire escape, bearing her father's bloody heart in a bag. Somewhere uptown, her sexy Shagets waited, smoking a Lucky, reading a dime novel. "I'm an American," Jessica proudly asserted. "That's what you think," the audience muttered darkly. The future author and revolutionist sniffled. He wanted to follow Jessica down those stairs. He wanted to sit in his mother's kitchen forever. He wanted to join Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. He wanted to write great poems in American lingo. It was too much. No wonder that boy broke down. His mother comforted him with a sour pickle. 3. When I read that play, Back in World Literature 2, I thought I was Portia. All the Jewish girls did. When I ran away from my father after I graduated, psychologists cheered me on. Talk show hosts said, "Atta girl, families are old coats. You've got to shake them off. You don't stay at home in America. You go somewhere else. This is a country of passionate self-creators." Jessica knew this. Shylock wouldn't admit it. 4. When I left my father, I ran away down the mountain. It was fall. The world had turned orange. The roses had died. I rented a tenement room in the glittering city. Each day on my way to work, I passed the theater where my father's favorite author had his epiphany. The building was dark, but the marquee declared the last play. The bride got verblunged or lost. I married 2 Gentiles, but now I live with a Jew. I brought him back here to these flowering mountains. Outside, the orange leaves fall. Our last rose is red and arrogant. We drink Valpolicella and light candles for our dead. All of our fathers are dead. We buy lots of candles. 5. My father's favorite author disappeared into a footnote. His brave assumed name glitters like polished coins. His real name was shoved in a pocket, an old passport. His politics did him in, or was it his dream of America? My father met him once. He never forgot it. He shook his hand. He said he preferred him to Hemingway. Thank you.
I'm the person that fell off the stage at the West Side Y. This does not bode well. I'm Renee, and I'm here to introduce Barry Seiler. The notes that I was given tell me that Barry Seiler is the son of Jewish parents who were born in what is now the Ukraine, and that he's an editor of the American Book Review. I take that on faith, right? What I know about Barry is that his poems are good poems, and they're insightful and lyrical, and I'm particularly fond of the new book. Run out and buy it. It's called The Waters of Forgetting, and I'm very anxious to hear him again. Please welcome Barry Seiler.
Hi, I'll read my contribution to the anthology, and then I'll read some recent pieces. This is called Digging in the Streets of Gold. My parents were fish. They came from Europe swimming. This was before Hitler was invented, when a wheelbarrow of money got you a loaf of bread. Twice they voted for Stevenson, and he dropped dead on the streets of London. Mamie was drunk, McCarthy mad. They did their jobs. They didn't weep over the Rosenbergs. They tried to buy their way out of history. The rising elevator was their armor, the wolf at the door the family crest. 2 weeks before he died, my father smiled wisely over murdered Kennedy and lifted his shovel and bent his back and went to dig in the streets of gold. I'm going to read some poems that I stole from the lives of my students, actually. It's called A Happy Man. When they first came here, they lived with an aunt, his father's sister, but they quarreled, and she told them to go live under a bridge. They moved to East Newark. He cried in school because he knew no English, and later, after he had learned the language, he cried because his skin was white. You see, he says, this is why I cannot love this country, because of those tears. When he asked where he was born, he says, it would offend my ear to hear you pronounce it. Then he goes around the room insisting we try, Uruguay, Uruguay. Our failure delights him. The truth is, he says, my parents were not starving, but my father knew they must come to America for the sake of his son's education. He says that no one is as wise as his father, who learned so much in his short life. Since his father died, no one can tell him how to be machista. For his father, he has shed many tears and prays to shed tears for him all his life. Next month, he will become a citizen. About this, he feels ambivalent. Ambivalent is not his word. He would say angry. He would say resigned. I know I am not very happy, he says, and it shows. But for the sake of my father, I will make my peace with this country. For his sake, I will become a happy man. A better life. The parents, Croatian, came from former Yugoslavia in the late 60s for the usual reason, a better life. And for a time they had it. Her father, a vigorous man, worked as a laborer, made a decent living, brought home his paycheck. Before she spoke English, she spoke Croatian, and still has a slight, almost charming accent. She was a bright child and excelled in school, developed ambitions beyond the usual accepted for women of her culture. No one minded. No one encouraged her. Father studied English at night. He had ambitions as well. Mother struggled but could not master the language. It didn't matter. She had relatives. But the father contracted a rare form of arthritis and went on disability. And finding a neutral tone, she says, became an alcoholic. The family unraveled. The father became abusive, beating her sometimes mocking her desire to enter medical school, a desire born of the tender care of nurses and physicians who attended her fractures and bruises. She wants to explain herself. She never wanted to end up like her friends on the street, doing drugs, selling their bodies. She never wanted to end up like her brother, just out of high school, without a clue, suffering from some vague malaise. Last spring, she went on vacation to Mazatlan, but couldn't relax, couldn't sleep. Next year, she'll graduate with honors. We express concern, but she shakes her head, almost angrily. Don't worry about me, she says. Don't worry about me. She says, I intend to make it. Forbidden love. He would hurry from the engineering school across the street and wait faithfully just to escort her hand in hand a floor or two to her next class. Furtive touches, glances, whispers that skittered around the hallway, gathering to them traces of the eternal. Forbidden love. They were so sweet, and they came from different castes. Don't ask what's in the name. In their culture, distances you and I cannot calculate. When her papers were late, she lied. But I left them in your mailbox, sir. You must have received them. She spoke with such flattering politeness, such careful rehearsal. Of course, the papers never did show up, and she showed only now and then, staring longingly through the porthole in the door for that head of dark hair. Finally, I received a note. Was she attending class? Was she passing? Ask her to come in for a conference. One lucky morning, I got the two in tow, and in my most fatherly fashion, escorted them to the dean's office. It was so sweet, you would have thought they were visiting the justice of the peace, the way they entered shyly and eagerly. I was thanked. The door closed. The rest is secondhand. They called the parents in. The dean was a reasonable man. He knew the proper tone of voice. Once he had been a minister, but in midlife had changed careers to something he felt more challenging. What could he say? This is America? This is how we live here? Exactly so, they must have thought. Exactly so. They pulled her out of school. She would do as they proposed. The boyfriend was sent back to India, and a proper marriage was arranged with a woman from a suitable caste. By now he must have children of his own, and she, I suppose, has children too. People adjust. This is not a tragedy. A little desire, a little sorrow, are enough to bear, enough to record. Who here remembers this couple, walking the hallways hand in hand as if they were on a garden path? In the real world, you make your own Eden, as you can, even at a state university. I want to remember them that way, hand in hand before the forbidden. I want to honor the ease with which she lied in the name of love. I want that door to stand open, please, a little longer. And the last one I'll read is a poem called The American Novel. At the end of her essay on individualism and community in some American novels, she attached a note describing a family friend, a professional in his middle 40s, divorced with a child, come to the house for help. All night he had been smoking crack and needed now their support. Help him please get into rehab. They let him out back. It was a big property. He needed to be outside. Really, they all did. All of them, she writes, had been where he was. He walked to the back of the property and then, in circles about 30 feet in circumference, round and round in a deliberate way, staring at the ground, enacting some ceremony. "What are you doing?" she asked. And he considered the question carefully and replied, "I guess I'm walking away from myself." But he kept repeating that circle. The story has a typical ending. Rehab worked for a year, but then he got caught doing drugs on the job and they let him go. The man who fired him, a 20-year friend, was her father. No one knows what he's up to these days. They all hoped the firing would somehow help. She remembered the story when reading the novels, all about people who by choice or circumstance live on the margins of their communities, and appended it for me to think about. She writes, she wants me to know this story is true. Thank you.